Hello! With this presentation, I would like to provoke and inspire wider thinking about religious artifacts, objects, collections, and objects in general. Because the same object can have mundane, magical, and religious associations at different stages in its life, or at the same time. And those connotations can vary between people as well. But the more we open ourselves to this diversity, the better we can tell the stories of those objects. So to start with the basics, what is a religious object? Well, objects, as well as having directly religious or magical associations, can have meaning through connection. Heirlooms and souvenirs, for instance. Artifacts are a connection to our ancestors. Those ancestors might be through blood, through culture, or people that have lived in the land before us. They're also connections to the inspirational other places, other cultures, other beliefs that are made exotic by space, time, or simply difference. But before we can define a religious object, we need to be sure what we mean by religion. Now I've put some symbols there, different religions, different faiths, by no means comprehensive. But, there's one there that may not be described as a religion, humanism. It's certainly a worldview. Is it a religion? A lot of museums, a lot of policy looks at religion through the lens of religious traditions, i.e. named religions, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, and so on and so forth. But religion really goes beyond those labels. Religion, the word in English, comes from the Latin religo, to bind, to anchor or reconnect. And surely that's the role of museums as well, to reconnect. And religion can be informal as well as formal. It can be organised or not. But I would argue there are three poles to religion, shown here on the right. Belief, relationship, and experience. Now, belief can be trust in a deity. It can also be adherence to doctrine. Relationship can be about community, but also communion. And the gods can be family. Experience can be love, experienced with co-religionists. It can be the buzz you get from a ritual of some description. It can be the reciprocity of the gods. And it can be direct gnosis. In the West, we are perhaps conditioned by the dominant monotheist faiths to focus on belief to the exclusion of relationship and experience. Equally, what do we mean by secular? There are two definitions. Secular can be simply not part of a religious, ecclesiastical or monastic organisation, so that some organisations, some ceremonies, ways of being can be described as secular, but they are of the same faith, like that which is described as religion in that culture. So that here, for instance, a cathedral is clearly ecclesiastical, it is religious. But the city council may well have its own ceremonies which involve religious prayers and so on. Or it may be that ceremonies and pageants in the street have a religious theme, but they are secular because they are not part of the religious organisation. The other definition of secular is that it is something set apart from religion, setting itself apart from religion. And here secularism often rejects religion and also assumes that it has sole rights to science, in opposition to religion. But in museums, I would say that the problem is not so much interfaith dialogue, which we hear a lot about, but one of a dialogue, or rather a tension perhaps, between materialist, secular and spiritual worldviews, where materialist secular is assumed to be the norm, the dominant. Moving to something that is clearly part and parcel of what museums do, art and decoration. When are they religious? Well, Johann Joachim Winckelmann may have created the concept of art as distinct from religion when he set up the Vatican's Profane Museum in 1761. From then on, sculpture from antiquity became art rather than religious, or, by the standards of the time, superstitious. Malraux puts the split back to the theatre of Hellenistic Greece. Indeed, what we think of today as Greek mythology has a lot to do with the plays of that era. And in literature, art and film ever since, each iteration says more about the ways of the time than it does about the gods. So, certainly since the 18th century, art as a concept can be seen as a refuge from iconoclasm, allowing images and their appreciation to survive, if in a paranoid, secularized environment, an environment afraid first of all of idolatry and then of religion itself. But the ancient gods have survived through art, literature, folklore and artifacts. Their cults, however, have not. And those gods have changed. They've evolved with us. Diana, as invoked by modern Wiccans, is both different from and the same as Diana invoked in ancient Rome. The gods are ever changing to meet the needs of the evolving present. Malraux wrote, Van Eyck painted his huntsmen because they existed, and Eve, the Virgin and the saints because they existed even more. But Italy was now to paint Venus because she did not exist. And here we have the birth of Venus by Botticelli. But by being painted, she was given even more existence. In the same way, myths, legends and deities live anew in fiction and drama, whether Robin Hood, reinterpreted for each generation in film and on TV, or the trickster or culture hero regenerated anew in Doctor Who or Sherlock Holmes, perhaps. Here is a painting recently acquired for the Icony collection. It's by the late Norfolk artist and icon painter Ray Loveday, entitled Hands on Mug. It can be seen as a memento mori. It speaks of connections, of what is lost and what remains, such as this piece of Lowestoft porcelain washed out of the bank of the River Yare in Norfolk, or this bowl of Imari export ware, about 100 years old, that meant enough to its owner when it was broken to have it repaired with a highly skilled and expensive method of stapling. Or indeed, other artwork of Ray Loveday himself. Art on driftwood, pieces thrown away, degraded, but given new life. Artifacts, as mentioned, are a connection to our ancestors and to the inspirational other, including precious porcelain from the Far East. When those artifacts have been in the ground, they've become part of the land itself. So a pottery shard washed out of a riverbank, or a piece of worked flint cast up out of a molehill, can be a gift from the spirits of the land, the gods, or God, as of course can natural objects. And who tells the stories? Where do we draw the line, indeed, between scripture, mythology, folklore, and literature? Whoever writes something down may use traditional material, but also interprets it and makes things up. Whether they're George Lucas, who gave us Star Wars, J.R.R. Tolkien, Snorri Sturluson, who gave us the prose form of the Icelandic myths, the Venerable Bede, writing about his perception of English history, or Homer. Both Snorri and Bede wrote of a recent heathenism from a Christian perspective. Homer helped to evolve the mythology of his culture. Even translation is not without bias. Whether we're translating from an ancient text, a language from elsewhere in the world, spoken or written, we change what is said. We try to be true to the spirit of what is spoken or written. But we're coming from a different culture, even though it's only a linguistic one. Never mind the distance of space or time. And by translating, we create anew. And we translate ideas, memories, concepts into museum exhibitions as well. We do our best to be true to the cultures where the artifacts come from. But we put our own culture into the mix. We tell the stories that we want to tell as we retell those of elsewhere or the distant past. Because secularized scientific, missionary and colonial museums have all had very similar aims. And what of magic? For some, magic is the corollary of religion, even its quintessence, whilst for others it is the antithesis of religion. Even in the classical world, magic performed by priests was fine, but that performed by lay practitioners was suspect of witchcraft. Magic is defined in many ways. It's many things. The power of an effective spell is similar to that of a prayer answered. The agency may be different, but the effect and objective process is comparable. Magic has always been part of human life. Similar patterns of folk magic exist regardless of form or religion or belief system, whether pagan, Christian, Islamic, Buddhist, or indeed materialist agnostic. Religion itself uses magic, although it employs different terminology. All too often the magician is a saintly devotee if they are a priest engaged in orthodox practices, but a witch or evil sorcerer if outside holy orders or using unorthodox practices. Talking of unorthodox, here's some quotes, allegedly from Oscar Wilde. One of them is, "We're all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars." Perhaps Lord Darlington, in Wilde's play Lady Windermere's Fan, actually expressed a banal view on male morality with that. But it has been taken popularly as a reference to seeing what is beyond one's sad lot, as in the 1981 song by the Pretenders, Message of Love. The other quote, "Religion is like a blind man looking in a black room for a black cat that isn't there and finding it." Actually, that one doesn't come from Wilde. It's based on a snide attack on Gnostics by Lewis Brown in 1931. However, with the misattribution to Wilde, it has become a common meme on social media of recent months. One that can be interpreted as an attack on religion or as a suggestion of what can be achieved spiritually. Because the magic of religion is its ability to make manifest that which does not exist but should. Things like compassion and justice, or creating something out of nothing. So we can see objects as the technology of religion and of magic. They can be tools of ritual, divination or spellcasting, for instance. Here we have a lemon charm for good fortune. a crystal ball for foreseeing the future, answering questions or communing with spirits, and an aspergillum, a brass container used for censing a church with holy water. Objects can be apotropaic devices. They're meant to avert evil and bad influence, whether those are marks on metalwork, mirrors, horseshoes, threads in a spirit trap that the spirits are supposed to be lured by to follow and get lost in, charms against the evil eye, widespread across Europe and beyond, or here a witch bottle meant to send back bad magic or stop it coming in the first place. They can be amulets and charms. I do love these wooden cattle or buffalo amulets from Swat Valley in Pakistan. If you look closely on the left hand one, you'll see a piece of wood has been cut out and then replaced. In the hole behind it sits something like a verse from the Quran, or dust from a holy place, something considered sacred by the maker to protect the animal. And on the left, a St. Christopher charm connected to a ship halfpenny from 1965. Was someone going on a journey that year? Were they born in 1965? Was the ship significant? Probably. St. Christopher is known as a patron saint of travellers and helped the Christ child across a river. We'll return to that. Objects, of course, can be devotional images, such as Guan Yin here from China, Ganesh from India, or in the middle, a wooden carved figure of Frey from the Norse tradition. They can be bearers of meaningful decoration. Here I've chosen the dragon. It's the same metaphysical beast, east and west, but our attitude to it is different. We have a Chinese low war drum and a Japanese saucer with dragons on. In the east, the dragon is a positive force of nature. In the west, we insist on controlling it, as with St. George on the 1951 commemorative crown for the Festival of Britain. We have to control the dragon and sometimes even kill it. Different attitudes to the same thing. All portrayed on commemorative coins as decorative art and as symbolic art. The low war drum, along with the phoenix, allows the dragon energy to permeate. Objects can be the tokens and badges of belonging. The crucifix on the left, a ring with Ganesh, fairly obvious, but in the middle there, it's a fan badge of a folk rock band. But that folk rock band happens to be pagan. So on one level it is a badge of religious belonging. Objects sadly can also be targets for iconoclasm, such as the niches of the Buddha statues here in Bamyan in Afghanistan, but also closer to home. Here's a bench end from the 15th century in the church of St. Margaret of Antioch in Cley next the sea in Norfolk. It's a bit odd, rather goggle-eyed, has tongue sticking out. It's a mermaid. She's holding a comb and a mirror. But, oh, looking closely, there's something odd. The face has no woodworm holes, yet the rest of the carving has, and it looks newer. And there's a strange line, which we see replicated in other bench ends that haven't been remade by the Victorians, the result of literal defacement in the 17th century by Protestant zealots. So, some objects are obviously religious. Medieval pilgrim signs and ampullae, and modern versions as well. They connect the pilgrim to the holy place or to the person that is holy. They're tertiary relics by means of touch or sight using mirror magic. They can serve as amulets, and they're a medium of healing and blessing brought back to the pilgrim's home and community. But they're also status symbols. They're badges for safe passage, proof of vows fulfilled, and souvenirs of early tourism. Icons are obviously religious, aren't they? They're portals and gateways to saints and deities. Traditions can be localized with them. There is a trend for Orthodox churches to adopt Anglo-Saxon and Celtic saints in Britain and paint icons of them. Ray Loveday, as previously mentioned, was an icon painter. He was not bounded by denomination and even painted on driftwood, connecting these wonderful figures to the landscape. But sometimes icons are reproductions sold as souvenirs, as the one on the right. Is that for use or not? And statues. Statues of deities and saints are obviously religious, surely. In the middle we have Ceres, presiding over a marketplace. Long, long after her worship disappeared. On the left we have Lucifer by Epstein. One could have an entire conference about the associations of that fallen angel and bringer of light. And on the right, a strange genre, Venus surprised at a bath. Showing the goddess nude when she does not wish to be seen seems to be inviting trouble. Lely's Venus, so-called, crouches on a plinth in the middle of a white cube gallery at the British Museum, with all the accoutrements of the gallery around. The wandering visitors and the peripheral trappings add to the sense of voyeurism. She's beautifully sculpted, but one feels uncomfortable. And Sir Peter Lely's motivations were probably not spiritual, I suspect. Now here's an interesting object, Krishna's siphon. The man standing in the brass cup is Vasudeva. He holds in his arms his son, Krishna. He is rescuing Krishna from certain murder, and he has to carry his child across the river Yamuna when it's in spate. But miraculously, as the water rises, it goes no higher than the child's foot, and it can be brought to safety to Mathura, a town in the northern Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, where these toys are traditionally made. They're teaching toys, because if you fill the cup with water, it goes no higher than Krishna's foot, but instead runs out through an ingenious siphon. By simulating a miraculous occurrence with the apparently magical action of the siphon, the cup not only reminds children of Krishna's story, it also encourages their curiosity about how things work. And of course, that story in itself has parallels with the Christian story of the flight of the Holy Family to Egypt, and of St. Christopher carrying the Christ child across a river. Then there are some things that apparently are not religious. Hazelnuts, for instance. These are food. They're an example of reproduction and a starting point for natural history and ecological narratives, maybe. But they're also part of the harvest of Mother Earth, seeds from the sacred hazel trees around the Irish Well of Wisdom, and here, prayer tokens of God's love for creation from the Julian Shrine in Norwich. And here's a hand axe from the Paleolithic. It's in the Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology in Cambridge. And if you look closely, you'll see that it's been carefully knapped around a fossil shell in the middle. Is it religious? Well, it certainly gives a feel of a deep connection to the artistic and aesthetic sensibilities of our forebears. And then there's coins with Britannia on. Britannia is a symbol of Britain, even merging with Boudica today. She's Roman in origin, an ambivalent figure that represents the province of Britannia, subjugated but strong. In the Elizabethan era, she became again a symbol of Britannia ruling the waves. Her iconography comes from the goddesses Roma, Minerva and Pallas Athene. Now, I don't know of anyone who works with Britannia as a goddess today, although I'd be happy to be proved wrong. But many honour sovereignty, an Arthurian variant on Britannia perhaps. And Minerva and Athene in Brigid from Ireland has a similar role. If you look closely in the middle picture, you can just make out a relief carving of Minerva, with her spear in her right hand, her helmet, and, believe it or not, an owl on her left. This is in Chester, or just outside Chester city centre. It's a Roman shrine that remains in situ. And someone had left a sprig of rosemary as an offering. She's still on it. Then we have controversial objects, such as the Gunderstrup cauldron. It was found in Denmark. It was assumed to be Celtic, but actually made in Thrace, with iconography relevant as far east as the Indus Valley. People make assumptions. In the base of the cauldron, bottom left picture, there's a rounder plate showing a bull slaying scene with what many commentators describe as a male hunter or warrior, yet she appears to be female. Furthermore, the interpretations of the bull's meaning that rely on that plate are flawed. It was added in antiquity to cover a hole in the bottom of the bowl. The scene top right has been assumed to represent human sacrifice. It is more likely, surely, to signify rejuvenation or initiation. And the antlered figure amongst animals, bottom right, has been assumed to be Celtic and to be that elusive deity Cernunnos. Yet has also been claimed for the Indus Valley civilization. And the ram-headed serpent in his hand is a theme of the Caucasus. People make assumptions. Assumption and speculations become received wisdom. And scholarly received wisdom becomes belief. And the scholars have been arguing about this one, the Nedra Sky Disk, which is in the exhibition at the British Museum, The World of Stonehenge, which at the time of the conference was coming towards its end. It caused an academic spat about its age in 2020. But most academics focus on its role as a scientific instrument, recording celestial phenomena. It's made of polished bronze and gold. The accuracy of its imagery compared to the night sky would seem to form part of its significance ritually. It's clearly a high-status ritual object. Its imagery depends on existing knowledge to locate it in place, just like churches being aligned to the east. Quite likely it was, symbolically, heaven's mirror, made to reflect light, perhaps of a fire, and shine like the sun or the moon. It would have been a powerful ritual tool on a starry night on the Mittelberg. Also in that British Museum exhibition were timbers from Seahenge, one of two Bronze Age rings of timber discovered on the beach at Holm-next-the-Sea in Norfolk in 1998. It's still controversial more than 20 years after it was extracted in 1999. From a utilitarian archaeological perspective, It was evidence of Bronze Age technology and lifeways. It had to be dug up and preserved because it was a record, not because of any sacredness. On the other hand, it was a structure embodying the social, cultural and spiritual soul of the people, a place of local sacredness, a transient beauty, to use Libby Peres's term, connecting the modern world to the ancestors and the deeper memory of the land. It should have been left unexcavated because it was sacred. Interestingly, the second ring, shown at the bottom, was not excavated at the time. And then there are the so-called Venus figurines, most famously the Venus of Willendorf in the Natural History Museum in Vienna. And with her in this slide, her alter ego as a fridge magnet. You can find that in the museum shop. Is it appropriate? Whether you perceive these figures to have been representations of deities, or maybe amulets for safe childbirth, one does wonder about the appropriateness of such a gimmick. On the left we have the chalk goddess from Grimes Graves in Norfolk, supposedly from the Neolithic, but probably made in the 1930s. The desire being to bring Britain into the fold of places that have these ancient representations of an allegedly universal mother goddess. As with the antlered figure on the Gunderstruck cauldron, scholarly speculation can become belief. And then we have ensouled statues. This is a nameless kami statue, or shinzo, from the Kamakura period of Japan. It's in the Sainsbury Centre for Visual Arts in Norwich. She would have been painted, but kept concealed in a shrine as a vessel for a kami or deity. She has been acknowledged to bring a sense of calm to the viewer, but she is very clearly ensouled and repays respectful communion. And there are other objects of power too. I've not got close enough to either of these objects to really get a sense, but the so-called witch bottle in the Pitt Rivers Museum, made of silvered glass, was collected by Margaret Murray, the rather controversial Egyptologist and folklorist, who was told that they do say there be a witch in it, and if you let him out there'll be a peck of trouble. And on the right, John Dee's crystal showstone or scrying stone. Dr. Dee allegedly received it from the angel Uriel in 1582. His son Arthur gave it to Nicholas Culpeper, the herbalist, who used the crystal's curative properties, but he put it aside because it promoted lethargy and had the tendency, apparently, to manifest a lewd demon. Objects of power indeed, perhaps. So, in conclusion, objects have many meanings, and we need to care and respect for objects. The specialness of being a museum object cannot replace the original sanctity or numinosity of a sacred or ritual artifact. Spirit is not a separate thing, and this has implications for museum practice, including object handling, storage, conservation, marking, photography, display, and indeed being seen at all, as well as the need in some cases for active honouring. There are many apparently simple actions that can desecrate, pollute, sully or otherwise deconsecrate an artifact, even without writing an accession number across the face of a ritual mask, as has been done. Guidelines have to suit the collection, but more things than one might think perhaps deserve this level of sensitive care. And finally, wonder. Objects have agency, even in a mundane sense. They can instill wonder and make connections, just like religion, and they deserve respect for that alone. Wonder tempered by rigour. So thank you for listening. I hope I've inspired some lateral thinking at least, maybe stirred up some arguments, maybe shown objects in a slightly different light, and shown that there are many perspectives. If you'd like to discuss more, or would like to follow up any of the references that lie behind this presentation, please contact me directly, perhaps via Instagram or via the website. Thank you again.